Hey, everybody, it is the Kentucky Weather Podcast. I am Chris, that is Jim, and this is a special edition of the Kentucky Weather Podcast.
Well, it's one we've been talking about for a little while.
It is.
To be prepared for it.
Mm-hmm.
And
we're dropping it, as the kids like to say now. This is going to drop before the actual winter weather forecast comes out on WKYT.
So, for those of you that are listening to it on Thursday, you are hearing it before, imagine what time on Thursday you're listening to it.
Still, though. I mean, you know what? Can I tell you? I kind of feel like Drake right now.
Oh, do you?
Just dropping something without people knowing?
Oh, yeah. All of a sudden, there it is. Oh, got to have it.
Yeah. Eat your heart out, Taylor Swift.
Forget that, yeah. But this is a big one. Why?
It's the winter weather forecast.
Winter weather forecast.
And here we are rolling into a brand new year, brand new season. Yep. Hard to believe. And you know what? I kind of feel like I'm going into this winter forecast, Jim, with a leg up already. And you're thinking, well, why is that?
Yeah, why is that?
Because I've already got 2 inches of snow in the bank.
You do. That's true.
Because we had 2 inches of snow already.
That's true. That first system.
See what I mean? And that counts.
Well, I mean, it
because
does.
It's a November through March winter forecast that I'm giving. I'm doing first flake to last flake in terms of snowfall.
And you know what the thing is? You did, in a podcast before it snowed, you did forecast snow on the ground.
Before Thanksgiving. Yes.
And it happened.
It did.
Quite early.
Couple of weeks to spare.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Had plenty of time.
And we'll see what happens after that.
Before we get going with this, a couple of just historic questions for you. How long have you been doing a forecast like this?
Officially now, I think this would be year 15.
Okay.
Started this back in 2004. Some have been really good. Some have been not so good. But of course you're forecasting for a season. Right. It's not like you're giving a forecast for tomorrow.
It's hard enough to get day 7 right.
Right. I mean, you're forecasting for 3 and 4 months down the road, and sometimes that takes a little effort.
Yeah, and it takes some luck.
Takes a lot of luck. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, you can get a pattern right.
Yes.
But the end result from that pattern isn't going to be the same every year.
No, absolutely not.
It's like last year. Really got the pattern right. It just set up a little too far to our northwest. So the winter forecast for last year was a stinker locally.
Wow.
Because from Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, north and northwest, it was almost a historic winter, if you remember.
It was, absolutely.
And we got in on a chunk of that for about 3 weeks in January, when we had wind chills 20 and 30 below zero.
Really cold stuff.
Really cold stuff. But then that southeast ridge just flexed enough muscle to keep Kentucky, more mild than anything else last year.
And that's what ended up happening.
That's what ended up happening.
So 15 years. You've been, of course, that goes back to the early days when the blog was just on
it was
WKYT.
It was a baby then.
Right.
Yeah. I launched that in 2004, and I remember boss at the time says, "What the heck is a blog?"
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And, and that kind of launched the, blogs that have followed since then. And some are still around. Some are out of business. And it's tough business.
Well, it is, especially if you're not accurate.
If you're not accurate. or better yet, I think people that launched these blogs in years after found out, you know what? If you don't work it, ain't nobody going to hit it.
You've got to stay on it. That's right. You do. So my next question for you, because we set up the history, you said you've missed some, you've gotten some right.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Do I know?
Do you know the number that you
The exact number? I do not. I do not. Here's what I'm going to remember. I'm going to remember 4 years in a row of hitting the bold prediction right. Remember that?
I do remember
from
that.
From the 10-inch plus snowstorm that we would get to the record low. That Lexington would set a record low this winter. Would have another historic snowstorm. We hit 4 in a row, and
that's right.
And now I'm on a streak. I'm 0 for the last 2.
Well, we're going to try to get that back.
Although 2 years ago, I think I missed it by like 5 degrees because I'd said we'd get a 50-degree drop in 24 hours, and we ended up with like 40-some degree drop.
I do remember that. It was significant.
It was close.
Because we were in the newsroom meeting, and you weren't there because we were talking about you.
Yeah,
and
my ears were burning.
And somebody said, it was our news director Robert. He said, "Well, Bailey almost got it right," because we were really close.
And it was 40. It was almost 45 degrees. But I said 50. I can't I can't count it.
That's right.
I can't count it.
But it was, close enough.
It was in the ballpark.
That's
and
all
sometimes
really
in weather, being close counts in hand grenades, horseshoes, and weather.
Yeah, and that's true.
Right?
To some degree in weather. I mean, it really is. All right, let's dig into the meat and taters.
Let's
of this
do it
forecast.
because you've seen it now.
I've been looking at it here. I've got it on my phone. Of course, we're on video over here too.
Yeah, I'm looking at it too. I put all the graphics together, but then I had to take some pictures so I'd remember everything that I put together.
Well, of course. I mean, because you've been thinking about this for a while. All right.
Yeah. I started back, early August.
See?
Yeah.
Because that's when you start to see some of the pattern elements come together.
And I've probably changed it 4 or 5 times, my whole thought process.
So how do you feel your confidence level right now?
Confidence level, my confidence level this time of year is always good.
Of course.
And all of a sudden you get into December and January, you're like, okay.
All right, let's start talking about spring.
Confidence, yeah, boy, I'm tired of winter. Let's move on. Let's just gloss over it and move on.
That's why you say that. That's why you say that.
When you see me on the blog in January, February saying, all right, let's go spring, I'm like, okay. Just pay no attention to that winter forecast.
All right, here we go. I'm going to ask you the first question. And this is just in general for the entire season.
Sure.
Your take on temperatures.
I think we're gonna the November pattern is likely a signal as to where we're going to go periodically through the winter. Obviously, the first half of November across the country was the second coldest first half of November in the satellite era, which dates back to 1979. Only 1995 was colder for the first half of November than what we had this year. So I think we're getting warning shots from the Arctic and Mother Nature this November, about what's going to happen as the winter goes on. So I think this winter, while yes, we're going to have quite a bit of back and forth because you know what? Regardless of what we all want to think, we're kind of skewed one extreme to the other the past few months. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've had historic highs, we've had record lows. Why would that break at this point? I just think the cold will outduel the milder spells that we have this winter. So I think we skew colder than normal.
Colder than normal. Mm-hmm. All right, so there now you have
that. And I'm not talking by necessarily a drastic margin. Just on the averages for a 3 or 4 month period, I think the numbers are going to come in below where we should be.
And that could be, on average by a degree.
A degree or two. Right. Yeah, you get a winter time that's a degree or two colder than normal. That's a pretty cold winter when you think about it.
Right.
Now, you get one that can skew 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 degrees colder than normal. You're talking about historic there.
Because then you're talking about an extended period where it has been very cold.
Exactly.
In order to skew the numbers down to that level.
Right. And, and last year we started to get into that pattern in January, and then it snapped right back at the end of January and into February. And it was it. It was toast. And all it did was rain. All it did was rain.
Of course it did.
Yeah. Well, we were talking. You were reporting on flooding.
Yes.
Last February.
Absolutely. We had that. You're right. Mm-hmm. I was looking at that in one of my Facebook memories or something. Mm-hmm. Let's look. Snowfall. What do you think?
Snowfall is the harder of the two to predict.
Of course.
Because, the elements have to come together exactly perfect. What I'm seeing, though, is a pattern that is still loaded with precipitation this winter. But obviously with more cold air in place, you get a little more snow. Not talking about anything that's overly above normal. I'm talking about above normal snows. Lexington, on average, on a given year, approximately 15 inches of snow is normal. So we may skew that closer to 20 inches this year, which would be above normal, but nothing that would, crack the top 10 or top 15 snowiest winters on record by any stretch of the imagination. Oh. But you know what? Let me qualify that. It just takes one storm.
It does.
Just takes one storm to all of a sudden make a, pedestrian winter historic and, in the top snowiest of all time.
And then, you throw in a small little inch here and inch there.
Nickel and dimers.
Yeah.
And dimers.
And then you've got quite a bit of snow.
And one of my analog years did just that. Was just a nickel and dime winter. Didn't have a big snow, but seems like once a week you had a 1 to 3 inch snow, and that was the winter of 2013 and 2014.
Oh, yes.
Remember that one?
Yes.
I think that was your first winter up here, right?
It was, and it nickeled and dimed us to death.
It did.
You're right. Absolutely
it
right.
It didn't provide anything, in terms of big snows, but you had frequent snows. And I think that was the winter that the bold prediction said we'd get our first record low since 1998, I believe it was, or somewhere in the 90s. Right. And I think we hit a record low, and I was up in Minneapolis at the time, and you were working.
You were. You were at a weather conference. And
right.
It was even colder up there.
I had a wind chill of 45 below zero.
Right. And, back here at home, we were still pushing, 15, 20 below for wind chill.
Right, yeah, right. And you had a record low, and you were texting me that day, we're going to get that record low tonight.
Oh, and it was brutal, So you're right. That was that year. For those that are listening.
Yeah.
Again, we've discussed this before, but this is going to have a whole different audience.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to have more.
Yeah.
What is an analog year?
Analog year is something that I will come up with, and most forecasters do. They'll come up with a year in the past that has had similar characteristics to this year, and I'm talking on a local scale. And also on a broader scale, like with what's going on out in the Pacific Ocean, was it an El Nino year, was it a La Nina year, or something like that? And then I try to find things that they have in common, and then I see how the rest of those winters from those analog years kind of turned out. And when I find several years that maybe had a common theme in there, I will incorporate that into making the forecast going forward. So I use history as a guide to where I think this winter is going to be going.
And it's a great tool.
It is a great tool, but what I'm finding over the past probably 4 or 5 years now is that I can't go too far back in the analog banks anymore because the years are behaving a little differently now. They're just behaving a little differently. So the same pattern in the 1970s that may have produced XXX isn't going to produce that this year.
For whatever reason.
It's just, things are just skewed a little differently. So, and I think that, it took me a couple years to actually realize that. So what I've tried to do is, yes, I'll go back and say, okay, this year from the 60s, 70s, 80s had some characteristics, but I may not put as much weight on those as I will some years from this decade. Just for the simple fact that, hey, this is where we are now. I'm going to use years that are more similar to this one, that are more recent.
And so that's the data that I understand. And and I'm looking at the list here. You've got 9 different seasons.
Yes, right. And last year's on the list.
And that's what I was going to say. You got 2018 and 2019.
Yeah,
right
and people may be thinking, well, how is, oh my gosh, that's going to be a horrible winter. How are you using that one? Well, again, if the Southeast Ridge, which I don't expect to be there this year, as prominent as it is, or as it was, if that's not there last year, you saw what happened in January. I mean, that was us for the wintertime.
Well, let's just say your 20-inch snowfall forecast.
Right.
It's busted.
Yeah, exactly. But you look at this fall, how different this fall has been from last fall.
That's right.
Last year, we had just wet. September was the driest in history this year. October was very dry, or it was very wet this year.
Yeah.
This November has actually been a little similar to last year, but the orientation of the cold has been different, which kind of tells me, okay, the overall configuration of the jet stream is a little different than last year. So it's had more penetrating cold east all the way into the deep south than it did last year.
So this would allow that to continue and get into
and that's probably signaling that Southeast Ridge isn't going to be as strong as last year.
I mean, we've already had true Arctic air.
We have
this season.
Already. We had the coldest numbers ever recorded for this early in the year. Back on November 13th, we had single digits.
It's incredible.
And that's a warning shot.
So there you go.
There you go.
And that's what you're trying to dig in on, what you're saying.
And some of the other years, I know you're looking at them. I put 2013 in there. Put 2008, the winter of 08, 09. People may remember that one in January, late January, I believe, for a big ice storm across western Kentucky. Doesn't mean that's going to happen this year, but the overall kind of using that one. 02, 03 is actually one of my favorites for this winter. 2002, 2003. And then you're going to think about that. You're going to be like, oh, that was the ice storm of February of 03.
It was. You're right.
So you got 2 winters in there that did have major ice storms. But again, doesn't mean I'm looking at that part of it. I'm just looking at the overall pattern.
Because you're right. You had the 09 that impacted us around here, and then you had the 03, which, of course, destroyed Lexington.
Yeah. And, a couple of the others, I've got 95 in there. I toyed with 1993 because this has had some characteristics in it. Now we start to get back in there. 1987 is on my list because that also produced some early November snows. And that was a kind of normal winter overall, a little colder than normal, a little above normal snowfall. So,
and at the end of the 86-87 winter, we had that significant snow
the April,
in April.
Yeah. April Fool's Day snowstorm in Eastern Kentucky of 30 inches,
That's
early
right.
April. And I always bring that one out when I hear someone say, well, it was 65 degrees today. That snow ain't going to stick.
I beg to differ, my friend.
Let me tell you, I saw 30 inches of snow in April.
Exactly right. And just think about this 2 inches we got the other day.
Right, it was 65 degrees that day.
Right.
A few hours before.
And then all of a sudden you got 2 inches on the ground.
Right.
I mean, it happens.
And that's something a lot of people underestimate. A lot of young forecasters especially. Snowfall rates will overcome a warm ground every time.
You know, we had to teach somebody that not long ago that was here, and it was a lesson that he has taken on and moved on with.
Right.
So, I mean, yes, absolutely.
Snowfall rates will overcome.
If it can come down heavy enough, buddy, it'll stick.
Right. I mean,
that's just it.
nature of the beast. 83, 84 is on there, and 63, 64 too. And those two actually have one thing in common. They had a big Arctic outbreak in December. I think Christmas of 1983 was the coldest Christmas on record in Lexington. I think we were -6, -7 on Christmas morning.
No, that's tough.
And what's really cool about that is that a year before, in 1982, is the warmest Christmas ever.
That's right. They
were 1 year apart.
I forgot about that.
Now, 82 is not on my list. That was a super El Nino then.
But that's interesting. I forgot all about that.
Yeah, so they're 1 year apart. And 63 also had a big shot of Arctic air. So if you like snow and cold for the holidays, you're rooting for 83 and 63 out of that list.
Because that's the way it plays out.
That's the way it played out. Those had some big Decembers.
And then 54, 55, what was significant about that?
54, 55, I like it because of the fall pattern. We had a pretty hot fall and a hot and dry September. So that made my September analog list. And then it also produced some snows, I believe, at the end of October, flakes, and into November. So, it's kind of similar to where we are. But again, now we're going back more than 50 years.
So we're into that time period.
So does anything from the 50s, relate to anything now?
Where things have changed.
Yeah.
I mean, and they have. The atmosphere's changed.
Oh, yeah.
Like it was.
It has. Exactly. Yeah, right. The weather patterns are different.
That's right.
People can fight over whatever it is.
And it's always been that way. And you go back centuries, and there have been big cycles like that. All right. Month by month, you have broken it down.
Yeah.
All right, let's start December. We'll start December. We'll start temperatures and just go for snowfall. What do you think?
And I'm looking, and I put this together probably a week plus ago.
All right.
And I'm already looking at my December forecast and going,
Well, you can change your mind right here.
I know, I can. I know. And I may change my mind. This podcast may not match up with what goes on air.
No, that's something.
So I can still change it. But I like Arctic air coming in December. I mean...
So a very cold December.
Why not? The question I have, as is, the forecast says it may be skewed more toward the second half of December. But as we talk right now, I look at the blocking that is setting up into the first week of December, and it has Arctic air written all over it across the country. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe I should have said, that's going to come in a little earlier.
Well, you still can.
I still can. But I'm putting that out as a qualifier in case it does.
So you're thinking about 1 to 3 below normal.
I'm thinking we average 1 degree, 2, 3 below normal in December, and a lot of that may be skewed toward those big Arctic outbreaks just kind of outdueling some warm spells in there. I don't think it's wall to wall Arctic air by any stretch of the imagination, because you can get some fairly mild swings, but it doesn't mean it's going to balance it out completely.
Right.
So, and don't be surprised if we don't get a decent snow or two in December.
And that's the thing. When we do get these big intrusions, these Arctic air intrusions, they don't last like
right.
Even when I was a kid, they were around.
Yeah.
Snow would stick a lot longer. So again, just a sign of the times that things have changed.
Yeah, and which is what made the Arctic air last week stand out more, because you could see snow in the shade for 6-7 days.
Oh, yeah.
And I've never seen that stay on this time of year. I mean, normally snow's gone the next day in November.
It took forever for it to finally go.
Just shows you how cold that was. That had some staying power with it.
Oh, my goodness.
So you go back and this time of year, and one of the... If I were just putting together a forecast based on straight November analogs, 1976 would be on there, because this November's been similar to that one too. But I'm not.
But you're not.
I'm resisting that urge. Now, that one was a brutal winter. Kids didn't go to school for weeks.
Right. And that used to be a lot more common.
Right.
They'd be out for, they're gone 2 weeks.
And they walk barefoot to school up a hill and foot of snow both ways.
January, you're talking, again, below normal with temperatures.
Yes,
So
but I've got in there, I've got on my January breakdown on how we get a lot of active Arctic shots, a lot of snow chances, especially early in the month, and I think we can get a break in there. I think we get a halftime at some point in January. That January of 1996 is kind of standing out to me a little bit, because it was skewed. That's one of my analogs. It was skewed toward the first half of January, and by the last 10 days of the month, all of a sudden you had record highs across the east, including here in Kentucky, when a lot of that snow melted. Then all of a sudden it came back in February for the first couple of weeks, and then left us toward the middle of February.
That 95-96 season, all right, you're referencing it. And I can remember, I'm going to give away my age here. I was in 8th grade that school year.
Mm-hmm.
And
I will not tell you where I was. Go ahead. Yeah.
And it's the only time during my whole school career that we went to school on Saturdays, because we had missed
just to make up for some of those days.
Yes.
Yeah.
We missed so much school that season.
And you know how that winter started out?
I can't remember. No.
with a 1 to 3 inch snow in November.
Just like that.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
It did.
Sounds familiar.
And then we got several light snows in December leading up to Christmas, especially skewed across the eastern half of the state then.
And that's, of course, where you and I grew up.
Right. And by February, what I expect is that as the month starts cold, with some snow chances, several snow chances in there, I think winter, instead of lingering this year, may actually end pretty quickly.
Really?
We haven't had an early spring in a long time.
I mean, how early are you thinking?
I'm thinking in late February. I think I wouldn't be surprised. I look at some of these years, and and I'm not giving the bold prediction just yet on this. I'm going to say I got to say something to make people watch, outside of just to make fun of me. But one of the things that has kind of popped up on my list is that at some point this winter, maybe late winter especially, would be the potential for a severe weather event.
And we're not talking severe winter storm. We're talking classic severe weather.
Thunderstorms. Because even if you look at the 2013-14 winter on my list, I believe it was literally on the first day of winter in like December 21st or 22nd of 2013, we had severe weather on a Saturday night. Big line of strong and severe thunderstorms and high winds made its way through here.
So you're thinking
into the overnight, and so we'll see. It was 2013. You would have just
that's right.
You'd have been a baby here.
Or not here yet. Maybe.
Not here yet.
Maybe, yeah. But now I think I remember the particular situation you're talking about.
It was the first day of winter.
Yes,
it was literally the first day of winter.
A wild setup. That's
it
right.
It was, and we had a severe weather event then. So, I think this winter can also feature a severe thunderstorm event, especially with the back and forth temperatures. I mean, why not?
That's what you get when you get the classic clash of the air masses.
Right.
I mean, that's the stereotypical setup of severe weather, but But that's where it all starts.
Yeah.
When the two come together like
exactly.
that. How long are we into this?
Oh, we're 20 plus minutes now. So.
Oh, are we?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well,
gosh, we're going for a record podcast.
Well, hopefully we're going for record listeners too.
Right,
You know,
right.
So y'all hear this, share it, and tell more people about it.
And we got Amber Philpott out here just waiting on us to leave the studio so she can get in here and do her podcast.
I'm sure she's pacing outside that door right now.
I guarantee she is. Probably got a glass up to the door listening.
She would have stormed in by now. She'd already been ready to go.
Yeah, she hears us.
So overall confidence, now that we've talked about it, you've heard yourself say it.
I actually feel pretty good about the forecast this year. We have no sunspots, so the sun is very quiet right now. There isn't a traditional El Nino or La Nina. It's kind of a La Nada. There's neither of the two. Yeah. Although we're kind of borderline, we're skewed out in the equatorial Pacific, a little warmer than normal, but those warmer waters, instead of being off the coast of Peru, they're kind of out centered more into the middle of the Pacific, which typically portends a trough in the eastern part of the country. So,
which allows for the cold air
and that warm pool of water that is up in the Gulf of Alaska.
It's been there for
a while, and it kind of pulses. Sometimes it's a little greater, sometimes it relaxes a little bit. It was there in 2013.
Yeah, when I first got here, you started pointing it out.
It was there in 2014 again. I toyed with 14, but it was really skewed very late in the wintertime. But I like to see that because it basically delivers that ridge up into Alaska, which can dislodge the cold into the eastern part of North America.
When you look at it on the map and you see what Chris is talking about, and he's going to explain all this graphically, and there'll be graphics posted, of course. When you see it, you'll be like, oh, it's kind of like a seesaw. Now I understand what he's talking about when you get that big ridge to build up there around the Gulf of Alaska, and then it seesaws back down on the other side right into us.
Yeah. What about you? What your thoughts on everything you've seen as we go into wintertime, too?
My dear friend Kenny Harvner and I, before you got in here, he's the one videoing this behind the lens. He just told me to agree with you.
Just nod your head.
Agree with you.
Kenny.
But what I did tell him beforehand is these milder shots are becoming more and more common, so cold doesn't linger like it did.
Right.
And that's what I mentioned a minute ago. So I think everything you said is right on par with anything I would say.
Yeah, we'll see. That and $20 now will get you a cup of coffee.
That's right.
Because that's what it takes now for a cup of coffee. Right?
It just about does. But really, some seriously cold shots.
I do.
Then a little mild ups.
And it's a back and forth.
Yeah,
back and forth this winter. So but that's also a very active winter, and one that shouldn't lead to an active storm track. So hopefully, if you want snow, you get your snow. If you don't want snow, I more power to you, I guess.
Yeah.
For my winter forecast, I need some snow at least.
It's loaded with potential.
It is loaded with
the thing.
potential.
Just listening.
And again, we're not going crazy high on the snowfall end. We're not going crazy cold on the temperature end. So, but again, it just takes that one storm to change it all.
And Chris is going to have like I said, all these maps, all these graphics will be posted on WKYT.com. You'll be able to see your snowfall map.
We'll have the actual winter weather forecast on WKYT TV. We'll have it, the video posted as well on social media on WKYT.com. We'll also have a live special Thursday evening, 6:30 on the CW winter weather special. You're going to be in here for that.
That's right. People will be able to go back and watch it too.
I'll have to get you some coffee to stay awake.
It's going to be tough.
It's going to be a long day.
It's going to be a long day, but we're going to do it. We'll have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah,
too.
we will.
So, and then our next podcast, we'll try to do it early next. I wish podcasts were live.
We'll likely do it right before Thanksgiving.
That's what I
How
was
about
going to say.
that?
To kind of address that.
Yeah.
Good looking storm coming.
Couple of good looking storms. Yeah, I'm telling you that early December pattern already has my winter forecast going. Oh,
I'm telling you, right before Thanksgiving, somebody in this country is going to get hit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Could be a disruptive storm for travelers.
Yeah. But we'll
Jim,
talk about that later.
Yeah, we will, buddy. As always, we've had fun.
Did we?
I don't know. It remains to be seen. We'll revisit this winter forecast in March.
Let's do it.
Maybe. It depends. It depends.
Oh, man.
Okay? Depends on how it goes.
On what we can remember.
Yeah. All right, folks. We appreciate you all being with us. Take care.